He called me the monster. For 3 years, I let him.
Me kept the bandages on for 3 years, and in that time, no one in Adrian's house ever saw her whole face. She wound the gauze each morning in the powder room at the end of the hall, the one with the cracked mirror, because Adrian had long since moved her out of the master suite. She did it slowly. She did it the way a soldier cleans a rifle he is not allowed to fire. The cotton went over the left cheek first, then across the bridge of what had once been a fine, straight nose, then under the jaw, then up again, layer on layer, until only the eyes were left open, 2 dark almonds steady above white linen.
The scars beneath those wrappings are hideous, child.
She had been told this so often by so many people in this house that she no longer thought to question it. She thought only of keeping the wrappings clean, dry, and close against her skin.
The day these come off, I will be free.
The powder room had a lock, and May never used it. She had decided this in the first month, the way she decided most things in that house, by imagining Vivian's face if a servant reported it.
A locked door is a rope I won't braid for them.
So she wound the gauze with the door ajar, and she learned to do it by touch, alone, without the cracked mirror, because the mirror was a kindness she did not want to owe, and a record she did not want kept. Her hands knew the path of the linen, the way a pianist's know a scale. 23 loops, never 22, never 24, because 23 was the number her mother had taught her a long time ago, in a hospital corridor that smelled of disinfectant and jasmine, when May was small and her mother was rolling a bandage for a man who had burned his hand at the kiln. Her mother had been a surgical nurse. Her mother had died at 34 of a thing the doctors called an anomaly, and May, who was 11 and who would later become a doctor herself, learned to call by its long clinical name so that the grief would have somewhere precise to live. Her mother had wound bandages the way May wound them now, slowly, without hurry, without ceremony, because the wrapping of a wound was a private contract between the wounded and the one who tended them, and the house did not get to be a party to it. Adrian stood in the kitchen doorway watching her pour his coffee. He did not say good morning. He had not said it in 11 months.
Set it down and go.
Celine is coming at noon. I won't have the tutor explaining the monster.
May set the cup on the marble without a sound. She had learned in this house that a sound was an excuse. A teaspoon touching china was an excuse. A shoe on tile was an excuse. She walked out past him, and as she passed, he turned his face away, the way a man turns from an open wound he has no intention of treating. Vivian, Adrian's mother, kept the house. She kept it the way a general keeps a garrison, and she had kept May inside it the way a garrison keeps a prisoner it is a shame to admit it holds. Vivian was tall, silver-haired, upright, and she wore her pearls at 6 in the morning as though expecting inspectors. She had never touched May. She did not need to. She had only to turn her cheek when May entered a room, a slow, deliberate turning that said, clearer than any word, that the air May displaced was unwelcome to her.
Poor girl. The fire took her face. Adrian married her out of charity.
The fire took her face, you know. Adrian married her out of charity. Out of pure charity. May heard it through the ventilators. She heard it standing in the pantry with the flour tin and the bowl of soaked rice. She heard it so often that for a while, she almost believed the woman was capable of pity. Vivian's mornings had the precision of a military ceremony. She was down at 5:40 before any servant, and she stood in the morning room with the lamp still low, and she read the previous day's ledger entries in a leather book bound in the same dun color as the wallpaper. The ledger was not the family's accounts, which a firm in the city kept. The ledger was Vivian's own, written in a hand that had been taught penmanship at a school that no longer existed, and in it she recorded things that no firm would have understood. Who had been seen speaking to whom, which servants had asked for advances, which tradesmen had looked too long at the house.
Stable. No trouble from her today.
Meaning the bandaged woman had caused no trouble and could safely be ignored for another 24 hours. On the days May had asked a question, or left her room at an unusual hour, or been seen by a guest.
Watch. She moved at the wrong hour.
May had seen the ledger twice. She had seen it the way she saw most things in that house, by being where she was not supposed to be. And she had read Vivian's neat small terror in the columns, and she had understood that the ledger was not a record of a household, but the inventory of a siege, and that Vivian, for all her pearls, had spent 3 years defending a position she knew was untenable, and the defending was the thing that would, in the end, undo her. Because you cannot keep a ledger of a woman you have buried and continue to believe every morning that the woman is truly gone. There had been a kitchen maid before Ruth's time, a young woman named Petra, who had lasted 4 months in the house because Petra had, on her second week, looked May in the face and said, "Good morning, ma'am," as though May were the lady of the house, which she was. Vivian had not raised her voice. Vivian had never raised her voice in May's hearing. She had simply, the next day, reassigned Petra to the stables, and the week after that given her notice, and the week after that Petra was gone, and the kitchen had learned the lesson Vivian had intended it to learn, which was that the word ma'am applied to May was a term of employment the house did not renew. Ruth, who came after, had understood. Ruth was older and had no illusions, and Ruth called May nothing at all, which was its own kind of courtesy, because a name not spoken was a name not lied about, and Ruth, in her silence, was the closest thing to an honest person that house had produced in 3 years. The fire. 3 years back at the rehearsal dinner, the curtains in the east gallery had gone up. May had been standing beside Adrian in her wedding white, and by the time the smoke cleared, she was on the floor with her cheek against the burning carpet, and her veil melted into the side of her face. Adrian had pulled her out later, after the photographers were gone. The doctors told the family she would be disfigured for life. Adrian, who had signed the marriage contract that morning, did not break it. He reassured them with a steady,
I signed the contract this morning. I will keep my word.
My son keeps his word, even to a ruin.
And so May was brought into the house bandaged, and the bandages stayed, and stayed, and stayed, and no one in that house once asked her to take them off. May remembered the first 3 weeks in the hospital the way one remembers a fever dream, in fragments that did not always keep their order. She remembered the first surgeon, the young one with the wire spectacles leaning over her in the burns unit and saying, in a voice meant for the nurse beside him, and not for her, "Superficial, mid-dermal at worst. The face will heal clean inside a year. There'll be a little dyschromia, that's all." She remembered the nurse, the one she would later trace to the village, cleaning the left cheek with saline and telling her gently that the worst of it was the veil residue, which would lift. She remembered being able, in those first days, to open her eyes in the morning and feel the air on the whole of her face. And she remembered the morning that stopped, the morning a different surgeon came in, an older one, a man with a silver pen and a private room, and the curtain was drawn around her bed, and he did not introduce himself, and he did not look at her face. He looked at a clipboard, and the clipboard already had the word written on it, the word that would go on the certificate, and the word was disfigurement. And it was written in the hand of a woman May had not yet learned to fear, because May was still, in those days, under the impression that the people who came to her bedside meant to help her. Her grandfather died 11 weeks after the fire. He died in the town where she had been raised, 200 miles from Adrian's house, and Vivian did not permit May to attend the funeral.
You are in no state. I will send flowers in both our names. Adrian will represent the family.
May, still bandaged, still weak, still believing the certificate that lay on the bedside table was the true one, had nodded, because she had not yet learned that the first thing a jailer takes from you is the right to mourn the people who would have come to get you. It was not until the second winter, when she found the holding account, that she understood her grandfather's death had not been a misfortune that befell her in a weak moment. It had been the precondition. With him gone, there was no one in the world who would have walked into that house and said, plainly to Vivian's face, "Take those bandages off my granddaughter." And the understanding of that, when it came, was colder than the fire had been. Celine came at noon as promised. She came the way she always came, in emerald satin and chestnut waves, glossy and warm and loud where May was muted and pale. She walked past May in the hall as though May were a piece of furniture that had been delivered to the wrong room.
Darling.
Softening at the edges, coming alive. May stood at the foot of the stairs and watched them go into the drawing room together, and she did not look down because she had taught herself not to look down. Looking down was an invitation to be pitied, and pity in this house was a knife that came dressed as a guest. May had a room on the 3rd floor now. It had been the sewing room once. There was a narrow bed, a desk, and one window that faced the back garden, where no one ever sat. She kept the door unlocked because the lock was broken, and because, she had decided early, a locked door in this house would only be taken as evidence against her. In the desk drawer, under a folded handkerchief, she kept 3 things: a folded hospital certificate, a photograph, and a small leather notebook full of dates. The certificate was the one they had not let her read. The photograph was of a woman in a doctor's coat, taken on a ward, laughing. The notebook was the proof. There were a great many dates in the notebook, and beside each date a name, and beside each name an amount, and beside each amount a question she had not yet been allowed to ask out loud. Under the handkerchief, beneath the notebook, there was one more thing May kept, and she kept it not as evidence, but as ballast. A sheaf of letters, 12 of them, written in her own hand on the cheap lined paper she tore from the pad in the kitchen, addressed to her grandfather and never sent, because by the time she had begun writing them, he was 3 months in the ground. She had written the first one the night she understood the holding account, and she had written it the way one writes to the dead, not to inform them, but to keep company with them, to tell the man who had given her the trust deed what had become of his weapon while it lay in her drawer unused. She wrote him about the roses. She wrote him about the boy's drawing. She wrote him about Ruth, and about the cracked mirror, and about the 30 seconds every morning. She did not write him about the hate, because there was not much hate, and what there was, she did not want to put in a letter to a man she had loved, because the dead deserved to be left one place where the living do not offload their corrosion. She folded each letter into thirds and tucked it behind the notebook, and she added one every month, and by the 4th spring there were 12, and they were the closest thing to a diary she kept, and she kept them for the same reason she kept the certificate, which is that some things exist to remind you that you were thinking.
Someone had to remember. I could still think.
The notebook had not filled itself. May had filled it, entry by entry, over 2 years, in the interstices of a life designed to leave her none. The holding account she had found on a Thursday in the 2nd winter, when Vivian had gone to the city for a fitting, and Adrian was at the firm, and Celine had not yet been installed in the drawing room as a permanent fixture. May had been told to polish the silver in the morning room, which was a task Vivian assigned her whenever she wished to remind the house that the wife was, in Vivian's economy, a servant with a ring. May polished. She polished slowly. And when she reached the rosewood table where Vivian took her tea, she tried the small drawer beneath it, because the morning room was empty, and because a drawer untried was a door unopened, and the drawer was not locked, because Vivian did not believe the bandaged woman could read. Inside the drawer was a leather wallet, and inside the wallet were quarterly statements from a private bank, and the bank's name was One May knew, because it was the bank her grandfather had used, and the statements recorded transfers from an entity called the Lynn Heritage Trust into an account Vivian controlled. And the amounts were large, and the dates went back 3 years to the month after her grandfather's death. And the name on the receiving account was Vivian's. And May stood in the morning room with the silver cloth in one hand and the statements in the other, and she felt the floor become, for a moment, a hinge, and the house swung open along it and showed her, in one awful, clear glance,
I saw the whole machine of my own burial.
She did not take the statements. She had learned by then that a thing taken is a thing noticed. She read them standing, and she read them again, and she memorized the figure to the last decimal, and she closed the drawer, and she replaced the wallet, and she finished the silver, and she put the cloth back in the kitchen drawer where Ruth kept it, and she said nothing to Ruth, and Ruth said nothing to her. And that evening, May sat at the desk in the sewing room with the leather notebook open, and she wrote the first entry. In a hand so small it could have been mistaken for an insect's track, and beside the figure she wrote a single question.
Who signed for these?
It took her 8 months to answer it, and the answer, when it came from the nurse in the village, and from the nurse it led to the second surgeon, and from the second surgeon it led to the fire. And from the fire, it led back to the morning room where she was standing, polishing, and she understood, by the time the chain closed, that she had spent a year being a witness at her own autopsy. That night, Adrian came to the 3rd floor. He did not knock. He had not knocked in a year. He stood in the doorway with his collar loosened and his tie pulled down, and he looked at her the way a man looks at a bill he has been putting off paying.
The Lees are coming Saturday. You'll eat in the kitchen.
I understand. I understand.
Is it? Still? So bad?
She had learned that an answer, in this hallway, was only ever the wrong starting point for the next humiliation. She stood in her bandages and waited until his footsteps were gone, and then she sat on the narrow bed and wound the loose end of the gauze between her fingers and thought about the word still, and how he had used it, and what it meant that he hadn't once, in 3 years, looked beneath it himself. Saturday came. The Lays came. Vivian moved through her own house like a conductor, and May was kept in the kitchen with the servant's radio turned low. She could hear the laughter in the dining room. She could hear Celine's bright particular laugh above it, holding the room the way a soloist holds an auditorium. And she could hear Vivian, after the second course, drop her voice to that well-rehearsed sigh. Adrian married her before the fire, you know.
A contract's a contract. She was so pretty then.
May set the bowl she was drying back on the rack. She pressed the cloth flat. She counted to 10. And then, for the first time in a long while, she let herself think the whole thought, the one she had been storing like water in a sealed jar. They do not know what is under these bandages. They have never known. They were told, and they believed, because it suited them to believe. The helper in the kitchen, an older woman named Ruth, watched May with a look that was not pity, but something tighter. Ruth had been in the house longer than Vivian had. She had ironed Adrian's christening gown, and she watched the bandaged woman dry the dishes one by one with the exact unhurried care of a person who is not defeated but is waiting. And something in that watching made Ruth uneasy in a way she could not name. "You don't have to do those," Ruth said. May said, "I know."
I do them because one day this house will be mine.
"And I would like to know where everything was kept." Ruth went very still. Then she turned back to the sink, and she said nothing, and she did not tell Vivian. She did not tell Vivian because she had lived long enough to know a true thing when she heard one, even when it came wrapped in white linen from a mouth she had been taught to ignore.
Don't look at her! Not ever!
He could not bear for the Lays, for the partners, for the men at the club, for the photographer at the annual gala, for the new tutor he had hired for the children of his late cousin, whom the house also held. He kept May on the 3rd floor, or in the kitchen, or when there was no other way, in the long back garden behind the yew, where he had once told her, in the first cold month,
Grow your roses there.
Stay there. It's kinder, May Ping, for both of us.
She had grown them so well that the gardener, who reported to Vivian, complained that the back garden had become the best corner of the estate.
Naturally.
The woman has nothing else to do, and had ordered the roses cut for the front hall, where May was not allowed to stand. There were children in the house. 2 of them. Adrian's late brother's children, a boy of 9 and a girl of 7.
A tutor came because Adrian would not have them in the city schools.
The tutor's name was Miss Hall, and Miss Hall was kind, and Miss Hall, on her third day, had found May in the back garden and had not flinched. The children had. The girl had stared, and the boy had said loudly, "Is that the monster?" because he had heard it from his uncle. May had knelt down in the dirt beside the rose bed, and she had said, in a voice the children had to quiet to hear,
That's what they call me.
"But I keep the roses. Do you want to see how I make them open?" And she had shown the girl how to loosen the binding at the base of a bud so the bloom could breathe. The boy watched. He did not call her the monster again. He did not call her anything. He simply came back the next afternoon, and the one after that, and sat on the bench while she worked, and after a week he brought her a drawing he had made, a woman with roses for a face. The children's parents had died the year before the fire, in a way the house did not discuss. Adrian's brother had been a quiet man, a teacher, the opposite of Adrian in most things that mattered, and his wife had been gentle, and they had been killed on a wet road returning from a parents' evening, and the children had come to Adrian because there was no one else, and Adrian had received them the way he received all inconvenient things, by putting them in a wing of the house and hiring someone to mind them and forgetting, to the extent that the law and Vivian's ledger allowed, that they existed. The girl did not remember her parents well. The boy did. The boy remembered his father's voice reading to him, and he remembered the way his mother hummed when she cooked, and he carried these the way a child carries treasure, in a pocket no adult thinks to check.
I healed children. Before I was anyone's wife.
And she never once reached into it, because a thing a child is protecting should be protected by the child until the child decides to set it down.
Curiosity is not tenderness. That pocket is his.
In the first winter, the girl fell ill. It was a fever, the kind that rises in the night and breaks a child's small body like a wave.
A virus, Doctor. It will pass. It always passes.
And the girl did not pass through it. She sank further into it, and on the third night her breathing went shallow, and the town doctor did not come back because the road was flooded, and Vivian...
There is nothing to be done.
May did not go to bed. May went to the children's nursery, which was on the second floor, where she was not supposed to be after the hour of 9, and she sat on the floor beside the girl's cot, and she did what she had been trained to do, which was to watch a sick child through the dark hours and to know, by the texture of the breathing and the heat of the skin and the small movements of the hands, whether the fever was drowning the child or merely holding her under. May had been a pediatric resident once. She had been good at it. She had been the resident the attendings asked for in the long winter of her own training, when the wards were full and the parents were frightened, and the children needed someone who could sound calm without lying, and the skill had not left her. It had merely gone underground, the way a river goes underground. And now, on the floor of a nursery in a house that had told her she was a monster, it came back up, and she sat with the girl through the night, and she cooled her with cloths, and she turned her when the turning needed doing, and she counted.
Breathe. Just breathe, little one.
And May slipped out of the nursery before Ruth came up with the morning tea, and no one in the house knew she had been there except the boy, who had been asleep on the rug at the foot of the cot, and who, in the morning, told Ruth only that the Rose Lady had come. And Ruth, hearing it, looked at May across the kitchen and said nothing, and May looked back and said nothing, and in the nothing between them, a house changed sides, though no one in it yet knew. Miss Hall, the tutor, found out, in the way tutors find out everything, by the small signs the children leave in their lessons. The girl drew a bandaged woman beside her cot.
The Rose Lady knows how to fix breathing.
And Miss Hall read it twice, and folded it, and put it in her pocket, and did not give it to Adrian or to Vivian, because Miss Hall had been trained as a teacher in a county where teachers were taught to protect children first and employers second.
I am not who they say I am.
And she began, quietly, without confessing it to anyone, to treat May as an ally, which in that house meant,
Thank you. You used my name.
and once, when the children asked, telling them the truth about the roses, which was that the roses were not a hobby but a vocation, and the woman who kept them was a woman who knew what she was about. May kept the bandages on, and the house kept telling its story about her, and the story was always the same. That she had been beautiful, that the fire had taken it, that Adrian was a saint, that Vivian was a martyr, that Celine was, if not the wife, at least the woman a man like Adrian deserved at his side. May listened to the story the way a prisoner listens to the sentence that put him away, not because there was anything new in it, but because the hearing of it, twice and 3 times a week, was the way she mapped its weaknesses. She knew which witness was shaky. She knew which date contradicted which.
I know exactly where their story breaks. The bandages.
Because the bandages were the one thing the whole story depended on, and they were the one thing that was hers. Celine, for her part, was not simple. Celine was the daughter of a man who had once owed Vivian a favor, and Vivian had collected that favor by installing Celine beside Adrian and by telling the house, with that same soft pity,
A mercy to them all. That is what I told the house.
A man needs a woman who can stand beside him.
a man needs a presentable wife. May, on the landing, did not turn. She kept her hands folded in front of her, and she looked at the wallpaper, which was a faded gold scroll pattern she had memorized down to its last tendril, and she thought, with a clarity that surprised even her, presentable. Such a small word to hang a ruin on. There was one night, late in the 3rd winter, when May came up the back stairs and found Celine sitting alone in the darkened kitchen, without the emerald dress, without the lipstick, without the laugh, in a gray bathrobe and with her mascara half dissolved. And Celine, who did not know May was there because the bandaged woman had learned to move without sound, was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of something, and a face that was not the face she wore for Adrian, or for Vivian, or for the Lays. It was the face of a woman who understood, in the small hours, that she had been installed, the way a chandelier is installed, to catch a particular light, and that, when the light changed, the chandelier would be unscrewed and replaced with a different one, and the room would not grieve it. Celine was crying, not loudly, the way she did everything else, but in a contained private way that startled May, because the crying was honest, and nothing else about Celine had been honest in May's hearing. And May backed away down the stairs without a sound, and she did not use the crying against Celine later, when she could have, because a tear shed alone in a kitchen at 3 a.m. was not a weapon. It was a wound, and May had decided, in the back garden, through 2 winters of roses, that she would not make wounds where she did not need to. There is a thing that happens to a person who has been told daily for 3 years that she is monstrous. She begins against her will to rehearse it. She begins to move the way the monster would move, small, hunched, along the walls. She begins to lower her voice to the monster's voice. She begins to keep to the rooms the monster is allowed to keep to. May knew this was happening to her, and she fought it the way a sailor fights a lee shore, with small, constant corrections. Each morning in the cracked mirror, before the bandages went on, she looked at the whole of her face for 30 seconds. No more, no less. 30 seconds, and then the gauze. She did this so that she would not forget. Not what she looked like. She would never forget that. She did it so that she would not forget that what she looked like and what they had told her she looked like were 2 different countries, and that only one of them was real. There was a night during the 3rd winter when a storm took the power out. The whole house went black, and the backup generator, which Adrian had neglected to service that autumn, did not come on, and the children were frightened, and Vivian was at the city, and Adrian was at the firm, and Ruth was in the kitchen lighting candles, and May went to the nursery and sat on the floor between the 2 small beds, and she told the children a story. She told it in the dark, in the voice the house had trained her to keep low, and it was a story about a woman who wore a veil because a dragon had told her the world would end if she took it off. And the woman wore the veil for a long time, and the dragon grew old and the dragon died. And the woman, who had been waiting for the dragon to die, took the veil off, and the world did not end, because the dragon had been the only one who said it would. and the dragon had been wrong about everything it had said.
The dragon was lying.
How did the dragon know the world would end if she was the one who invented the ending? And May said,
"Enchowershimutchen." That is exactly the question.
and May sat on the floor between them and did not move until the power came back at midnight. And she did not tell this story to anyone else either, because it was hers and theirs, and a story told in the dark belongs to the dark and to the people who heard it there. Adrian came to her once in the third winter, close to midnight. He had been drinking. He sat on the end of her narrow bed, and he put his face in his hands, and he said, in a voice she had never heard from him, a voice without its cold architecture, "May."
I don't understand why you won't let them look. I'd pay for it.
You have never asked me to take them off, Adrian.
And he had answered after a long silence, "I can't." And she had said, "I know."
That's the answer to your question. The answer to your question.
He had gone then, and he had never come to the third floor at night again, and she had known from the careful way he had shut the door that he understood he had said something he could not take back, and that some part of him, the part that had pulled her out of the fire and then resented her for being burned, had understood, in that room, exactly who in this house was the real ruin. Vivian ran the family the way she ran the pearls. She kept the layers clean and in order. Adrian was the outer layer. Celine was a tactical layer. The children were a layer she did not think about. And May was the layer she had buried, because the buried layer, the one no one had to look at, was what let all the others shine. Vivian had a ledger, and in the ledger there was a line marked Settlement M that she moved each quarter from the estate into a holding account no one audited. May had found the holding account. She had found it the way she found most things, by being in rooms she was not supposed to be in, doing tasks no one supposed she was clever enough to do, and she had copied the numbers into the leather notebook, and she had not told a soul, because a secret in this house, kept, was a secret that grew interest, and she was a patient creditor. The Lays came back in the 4th spring. This time the talk-at table turned to the hospital, the new private wing Vivian was funding, with her name carved over the door. "The Vivian wing," Vivian said, with the faint, practiced smile of a woman who has rehearsed being humble.
For poor souls like our May.
And Vivian said, "Well, one does what one can." May, in the kitchen, heard all of it through the vent, and she set down the cup she was holding very gently, because the name carved over that door was the same name on the hospital certificate in her drawer, and the certificate did not say what Vivian said it said. It said,
The fire never touched my face.
the first surgeon had written in plain prose that the burns were superficial and would heal clean within the year. It said that May had been declared disfigured by a second opinion, a private one, paid for out of that holding account, and that the second surgeon had been a man who owed Vivian a great deal of money and a greater deal of silence. So now May had the shape of it. She had had it for a year, really, but now with the wing and the carved name, she understood that the lie had been built to last, and that anything built to last had been built to protect something larger than shame.
It was money. It was money. It was always the estate.
Estate was the reason May had been married and bandaged and kept and humiliated, because somewhere in that estate there was a paper that made May its heir, and Vivian had spent 3 years making sure that if May ever unwrapped her face in public, no one in the world would believe she was anything but the monster, and would never therefore believe she was anyone worth giving an inheritance to.
The bandages were never my prison.
Bandages were the lock on a safe, and the safe was her, and Vivian held the only key anyone believed existed. May did nothing with this knowledge for 2 more months. She did nothing because doing something too soon would be to fail the way all the people in the stories she had read in the back garden had failed, by striking before the blow could not be answered. She kept the roses. She sat with the children. She let Ruth watch her dry the dishes. She let Miss Hall bring her a cup of tea in the garden and say carefully, "You know, You're the only adult in this house who ever sits with them.
They sit with me. There's a difference.
And Miss Hall, who was not a fool, looked at her for a long moment and then said, "Yes, there is." And May knew then that she had an ally, a small one, unpaid and unimportant, which is to say, the best kind of ally, because no one in this house would ever think to watch it. She had begun in the second winter to walk to the coast on the one afternoon a week Vivian permitted her out of the house, ostensibly for the chemist, where she bought the gauze. The chemist was real, she did buy the gauze, but the walk to the chemist took her through a harbor town 2 hours down the coast road. And in that harbor town, below a bookshop with a green awning, there was an office. And in the office, above the bookshop, there was a notary. And the notary was old, and the notary was honest, and May had found him the way a doctor finds a colleague, by asking the right question of the right person in the right apothecary. And the
Who keeps a notary's seal and owes nothing to the Kane name or Vivian?
had his own reasons, had written the address on the back of a receipt without a word. And May had walked there the next free afternoon in a sun hat and dark glasses over the bandages, and she had climbed the stairs, and the notary, whose name was Aldrich Penn, had looked at her across the small table covered in oilcloth and had not asked her to remove anything, because Aldrich Penn was 71 and had outlived 2 wives and a war and the kind of illusions that make a man ask impertinent questions. And he had looked at the bandaged woman and said simply, "Sit down.
I need you to write down everything I'm about to say."
Aldrich Penn had listened the way a man listens who knows that the long stories are the true ones. And at the end of the 4th visit, he had said, "Come back when you have the document you have not shown me yet." And
We will see if your grandfather's weapon still has an edge.
the gauze had been damp with sea air, and she had not told a soul. Adrian in the 4th spring began to look ill. Not in the body, in the manner. He had always been cold, but now the cold had a hairline crack in it, and through the crack something leaked out, a kind of guilt that did not know its own name.
Do you remember the rehearsal?
I remember the carpet, the smoke, you pulling me out.
After. You remember that it was after.
I remember everything, Adrian. That was always the problem.
He left. But after that night, the crack in him widened, and May saw it, and she marked it in her mind the way a general marks a weak point in a wall, not with cruelty, but with the cold attention of someone who has been waiting a long time to know where to walk through. Celine felt the crack too. Celine was not stupid, she was merely well-armed. She came to May once, on the landing, with a smile that was almost kind, which is to say, a smile that had a knife behind it.
You must hate me.
Doesn't hate a tool. One puts it down when one is done. Celine's bright eyes widened, and the smile did not quite recover. "What did you say to me?" she said. I
said, "And fine. When I am finished here, you will be set down gently. Because that is how I do things, and Adrian will look at what he has done. Your emerald dress will go back to the shop, and you will find another man."
Celine did not answer. She turned on her heel and went downstairs, and May heard, an hour later, the bright, particular laugh in the drawing room, louder than usual, and she knew that she had, for the first time, put fear into that laugh, and she was not sorry. The task of finding the nurse had taken May most of the 2nd year. The nurse had been dismissed in the 1st month after the fire, quietly, with 2 months' pay, and the suggestion that her services were no longer required. And the nurse, who was young, and who needed the work, and who did not yet understand that her dismissal was the first stone of a careful cover-up, had gone home to a village in the north. And she had said nothing to anyone about the woman in the burns unit whose face was not ruined, because no one had asked her, because the asking would have required someone in that house to suspect that the official story was not the true one. And no one in that house suspected it, because all of them had been told, and all of them had believed, and the believing was the foundation the rest of the house stood on. May found her by the longest route. She found her through a doctor she had trained with, who had a colleague who had a cousin who practiced in the county north of the village, and from that cousin she got a name, and from the name she got an address, and on a free afternoon in the second autumn, she had taken a bus, and then a smaller bus, and then a lane on foot, and she had stood at the nurse's door in her sun hat and sunglasses and bandages, and the nurse, who was not much older than May, had opened the door and had looked at the bandages and had gone very white, and had
Yes. It's me.
over a pot of tea in a kitchen with a copper kettle and a calendar 2 months out of date. The nurse had told her everything she remembered, and May had written it in the notebook, and the nurse had signed a statement there at her own table, and the statement was the attestation Aldrich Penn would later read aloud, and the nurse, signing it, had said,
I always knew they were lying. I always knew they were lying.
I just didn't know who would come and ask. I came as slowly as I could.
Vivian called May to the morning room on a Tuesday. This was rare. She never looked at me directly. Only the air around me.
I am opening the wing on Saturday. There will be press. You will not be seen.
Where will I be, Vivian?
In the kitchen. Or in the garden. Out of the photographs.
As you wish. But if I am not seen on Saturday, you will not mind if I take the children to the shore. Take them as far as you like. Take them as far as I like. Yes.
A reporter came to the house on the Friday before the opening, a young woman from the county paper with a press credential and a recorder, and Vivian received her in the morning room. And Vivian was magnificent. She had rehearsed this magnificence for a month.
Charity. Burden. These are the duties of this family. My poor daughter-in-law, terribly injured. She lives quietly upstairs. She is at peace with her lot.
Vivian's shoulder toward the door, as though she half expected the bandaged woman to appear. And May did appear, briefly, crossing the hall behind the morning room with a basket of laundry, and the reporter saw her for half a second. The white gauze, the wine-red dress, the dark, steady eyes above the linen, and the reporter looked at Vivian, and then back at the doorway, and then back at Vivian. And something in her face said she had heard a note in Vivian's performance that did not match the instrument, but she was young and she was on assignment, and she did not follow it, and she left, and the piece ran on Saturday morning, and it was the piece Vivian wanted. And May read it in the kitchen, clipping the paper in case it should one day be useful as a record of exactly what Vivian had sworn in print was true, because a woman who tells her story to a newspaper has, whether she knows it or not, handed the first piece of rope to the people who will, in the end, hang the story. The shore was not the shore. The children were the reason, the loving and true reason, but they were also the cover. Because on Saturday, while the whole house and every camera Vivian had hired turned toward the carved name on the new wing, May would be 2 hours down the coast, in a small private office above a harbor bookshop. And in that office, there would be a notary. And the notary would have a file, and the file would contain 3 certified copies of the things in May's drawer, plus
No living soul has seen this. Until now.
been preparing this meeting for 14 months. She had walked to the bookshop on her one free afternoon a week, in a sun hat and sunglasses over the bandages, and the notary, an old man, had never once asked her to remove them.
I am of sound mind. And of my own free will.
She had meant it, and she had signed her name in her own handwriting, the handwriting of a woman who had once signed a great many important things. Before the fire, before the bandages, before they taught her to sign nothing. Saturday came. Vivian dressed for the cameras in dove gray and her longest pearls. Adrian dressed in the charcoal suit with the dark tie, and his face was the cold mask it always was in public. But May saw the crack, and the crack was wider. Celine came in the emerald satin and stood at Adrian's side for the photographs, and not a single reporter asked where the wife was, because the wife, they had been told for 3 years, was a charity case, kept indoors, disfigured, the pity of the family. The cameras flashed on Vivian's smile. And May, 2 hours down the coast, with the children building a sandcastle at the water's edge, and Miss Hall watching them, walked
Good morning.
them ready. And the old man opened the file, and May opened her bag, and between them, on that small table, the lie that had held the house together for 3 years began, in absolute quiet, to come undone. The notary read the documents aloud. He read them slowly because he was old and because he respected what they were. He read the first hospital certificate, the true one, the one that said the burns were superficial. He read the attestation of the nurse who had cleaned May's face in the first week, the nurse whom Vivian had later dismissed, and whom May had, in the back garden, in the long evenings of the second year, finally traced to a village in the north. He read the bank ledger entries, the ones from the holding account, copied in May's hand and certified by the harbor clerk. And then he read the last document, the one May had not shown anyone, and when he read it, his voice slowed further because he understood as he read that the bandaged woman across the table was not who anyone in that house believed her to be, and that she had been, before the fire and the bandages and the long kitchen years, someone whose name he had himself read in the financial pages, and who
I was honored to witness this signature once.
This document was a trust deed. It was not new. It was old, older than the marriage, older than the fire. It
names you.
The full name no one here uses.
The very spine of the wealth that Vivian spent, that Adrian wore, that Celine glittered against. And it contained a clause, plain and short, that Vivian had clearly never read closely, or had read and assumed the bandaged woman in the kitchen would never be in a position to invoke. That in the event of any party to the marriage acting to conceal, diminish, or misrepresent the identity of the principal beneficiary, the whole
It vests in me. Free of the marriage. Free of you all.
had not forged it. She had not found it hidden. She had signed it herself, in this very town, in this very office, the summer before the wedding, as a condition of her own grandfather, a man now dead, who had loved her and who had not trusted the family she was marrying into, and who had, with the grim foresight of the old, given her the one weapon she might one day need, and died before he could see whether she would have the courage to use it. May sat with the notary for an hour. She drank the small, weak tea he made her. She watched the harbor gulls through the window. She thought about her grandfather, the steel of him, and about her mother, who had died young, and about the girl she had been before the fire, a girl with a face that flashed in the papers, and a laugh too quick for her own safety. She thought about the boy on the garden bench and his drawing of roses for a face. She thought about the way Ruth had gone still that day in the kitchen. And she thought about the crack in Adrian, and about Vivian's smile for the cameras, and about the long second after a blow lands when the struck person does not yet know they have been hit. Then she thanked the notary, paid him in cash from a small envelope, and walked back down to the beach. And she helped the children finish their sandcastle, and they drove home in the late afternoon, and May said nothing to anyone, because there was one more thing she had to do, and she had to do it inside that house, and she had to do it with the bandages still on. She had to let Adrian take them off himself. This was the part she had turned over longest in the back garden, through 2 winters of roses. She could have unwrapped her face at the notary's, on camera, and walked back into the house already unveiled, and the whole thing would have been over, a clean public snap. But a clean public snap would have let Adrian off. A clean public snap would have made him a bystander to his own revelation, a man who learned the news from his phone like everyone else. And May did not want Adrian to learn the news. She wanted Adrian to enact it. She wanted him to stand in front of her with his own hands and pull the gauze from her face and see in his own eyes first, before any camera, what he had spent 3 years refusing to look at. She wanted the man who had called his wife the monster to be the one who, with his own fingers, proved himself a liar to the only witness that would ever matter to him again, himself. On Sunday night, she went to the master suite. She had not been in it in a year. She stood in the doorway in her wine-red dress, the one good dress she had kept folded in tissue, the one she had worn the day of the rehearsal, and she had taken the children's hand mirror, and she had checked in the kitchen that the dress still sat right, and she had wound the bandages fresh and tight and clean for the last time. Adrian was at his desk. He looked up. His cold face did not change, but the pen in his hand stilled. "What do you want?" he said. Not a question, a warning. And
I want you to take these off.
she did not say please. She had earned the right not to say please. "They've healed," she added when he did not move.
The surgeon in the city cleared me. Take them off, Adrian.
Vivian, and the three of us will do it in the morning with the cameras you like so much. But one way or another, they come off tonight. Adrian stood. He stood slowly, the way a man stands when he understands that the next thing he does cannot be undone. He came to her across the rug. He stopped a foot away. He did not look at the door. There was no one to perform for. It was just the two of them, and the gold scroll wallpaper, and the long evening light. "May," he said, and his voice was the cracked one, the one from the third winter, the one without architecture. "If it..."
It isn't. It never was. It never was.
Not steady. They found the loose end of the gauze at her jaw, and he pulled, and the linen slid, and the second layer went, and the third, and the cotton over the cheek, and the strip across the nose, and the band under the chin, and the last thin wrap across the forehead, and the white fell away in a slow, soft fall onto the rug like a dropped veil. And May stood in the master suite of the house that had buried her, with her whole face uncovered, and her face was whole. And it was the face that had once been in the financial pages, and her...
You refuse to look. Now, you see.
I didn't know.
Sit down, Adrian. Your legs will.
Understood the facts. He would understand those later, in their order, in their weight. She watched him understand the one thing first. That he had lived for 3 years beside a woman he had refused to look at, and that the refusing had been the whole of his cruelty, and that the woman he had refused to look at had been the entire...
I was the only truth you had. I was the only truth you had.
Sat down on the edge of his desk, not dramatically, slowly, the way a man sits when his legs have decided for him. You.
Lin May.
He could not finish it, because the sentence he had ready, the one that began with you and ended with the name he had been saying for 3 years, was the wrong sentence, and he did not yet know the right one. And May, for the first time in a long while, felt something close to pity for him, and she did not let it soften her.
My name is Lin May. Not May. Lin May.
The principal holder of Lin Heritage Trust, the trust you've been spending from through your mother's holding account, as in the granddaughter of the man who built the wing your mother just put her name on. As
the surgeon's certificate. The fire was set to take my life.
the only reason I kept the bandages on after I healed was that the moment I took them off, before I had the papers, your mother would have had me committed, and the trust would have vested in the family. So
I gave her 3 years of the monster. Exactly what she wanted.
that she would never in all that time look...
The clause she overlooked in a deed she never read.
The fire was set. You're telling me the fire was set.
I'm telling you what the nurse saw, May said. I'm telling you what the bank shows. I'm telling you what your cousin once removed, the second surgeon, the one who signed the disfigurement certificate, admitted in writing to the harbor notary last month when he was shown the holding account.
I am not telling you a story, Adrian. I am handing you the file.
Read it before you decide what face to wear to the lawyers in the morning. She turned to go, and at the door she stopped, not for effect, but because there was one thing she had held back, and she found she could not hold it past this room.
I kept the roses. I dried your dishes.
Did it for 3 years with my face wrapped in the kitchen while you brought your mistress into my drawing room because I had to be the monster long enough to make your mother stop watching me.
Don't imagine I did any of it because I loved you. Someone had to be patient, and it was never going to be you.
Went down the stairs. She did not go to the 3rd floor. She did not go to the kitchen. She went to the morning room, where Vivian kept the tea things laid for the morning, and she set the leather notebook and the hospital certificate and the photograph on the little rosewood table where Vivian took her first cup, and she stood back and waited for the dawn. Vivian came down at 6, the way she always came down, pearls and posture, expecting the house to be already arranged. She came into the morning room, and she saw the papers on the rosewood table, and she saw May standing beside them. And for the first time in 3 years, May saw the woman really look, at her face. Because the bandages were gone, and the face was uncovered, and the face was not the face Vivian had been told. Every quarter, by the 2nd surgeon, was a ruin. Vivian went still. Not the way Adrian had gone still, with a man's heavy, guilty stillness. Vivian went still the way a machine stops when the current is cut, all at once and in every part. She looked at the face, and she looked at the papers, and her lips moved without sound. Then,
Lin May. Yes.
And then something happened that May had not planned, and had not, even in the back garden, allowed herself to hope for. Vivian's knees did not fold in a slow, theatrical way. They simply stopped holding her. She went down on the carpet of the morning room beside the rosewood table, in her pearls, in her posture, and she stayed down with one hand braced on the table leg and her face turned up toward the woman she had buried for 3 years, the woman whose face she had told the whole county was gone, and the woman's face was whole, and the woman's name was the name on the trust, and the wing Vivian had carved her own name over had been funded from the woman's own money, and Vivian, on her knees, understood all of this in a single terrible instant, the way one understands in a flash that one has been living in someone else's house, and that the owner has been, the whole time, the servant one was not even bothering to watch.
Mother, there is tea. I will pour. You sit. We wait for Adrian.
Then we go to the lawyers. The 3 of us. You tell them yourself.
Will tell them about the holding account. You will tell them about the 2nd surgeon. You will tell them about the fire. You will tell them because if I tell them, it is a prosecution, and you will go to prison in your pearls, and I do not want that.
I want the wing I paid for to stay open. The children keep their tutor.
Moses kept.
I want you to tell the truth out loud, recorded.
That there is a version of this story that is not the one you have been telling for 3 years. Vivian, still on her knees, did not move to the chair. I can't, she whispered. I can't say it.
You can. The truth rehearses better than the lie.
Adrian came down the stairs then. He had the file in his hand. He had been up the whole night, and his face, the cold face, the charcoal suit face, was gone, and in its place was a face May had never seen on him, a face that was simply awake. He stopped at the foot of the stairs and saw his mother on the carpet, and saw May standing over her with the tea things. And he understood, in the look between them, that the woman he had called the monster was the owner of the house, and the woman on the floor was his mother, and that he had, for 3 years, knelt to the wrong one. He did not speak. He set the file on the rosewood table beside the notebook, and he did not move to help his mother up, because he understood, with the clarity of the ruined, that to help her up would be to join her, and he was not ready to kneel, and he was not ready to be forgiven, and so he did the only honest thing left to him. He stood and waited, and let May pour. The lawyers came at 9. May had called them from the kitchen at 6:30, in the calm voice of a woman who has been awake all night and is not tired. Celine arrived at 10 in the emerald dress and was met at the door by Ruth, who said, "They're in the morning room, miss, and you'd best come see for yourself," in a tone Celine had never heard from a servant. And Celine came through into the morning room and stopped dead. Adrian was at the rosewood table. Vivian was in her chair, with her hands flat on her knees and her pearls on and her eyes on the carpet. And May, in the wine-red dress with her full uncovered face, was pouring the second cup.
Dad! What's happened? Celine, sit. There's tea. You're about to find out which of us is the foundation.
Lawyers laid the trust out on the table. They laid the holding account out beside it. They laid the surgeon's confession beside that, and the nurse's attestation beside that, and the harbor notary's certified copies beside that, and the morning room table became, in the spring light, a small, neat forensic garden, each paper a bud open to the plain. And May, standing, let them read it. She did not narrate. She did not perform. She stood and let the documents do what documents do, which is to outlast the stories people tell about them. Vivian, in her chair, heard her own name read back to her in the clause she had never read, and her face took on, for a moment, an expression May would remember for the rest of her life. Not fear, not shame, but the slow, astonished recognition of a gambler who has just understood that the card she discarded 3 years ago was the one that would have won her the hand. Adrian...
May. What do you want?
The wing stays open. It is renamed.
Children keep their tutor and this house. Celine is given a fair settlement and a train ticket and an apology from your mother in writing. The holding account is restored to the trust with interest. Your mother signs a confession before a magistrate today, and the magistrate keeps it sealed so long as she lives in this house and answers to me for the running of it, because I will not put an old woman in a cell, and I will not let her walk free in the county telling her version. And you, Adrian, you give me back my whole name in the marriage register, and then you give me back my whole life, which means a divorce that does not cost me a single morning of the 3 I gave you.
That is what I want. Take it or leave it.
If you leave it, the next table this is laid on is a courtroom's, and I will not on that day be the one pouring tea. There was a long silence. The spring light moved on the gold scroll wallpaper. In the kitchen, Ruth, who had heard none of this and all of it, put the kettle back on the hob because she was a woman who knew when a house was changing hands, and she did not need to be told. The children...
I'll sign. I want the train ticket and the apology and nothing else.
Nothing else from this house. And
I am sorry, and I called you the monster.
sorrier that I never once asked to see your face. I will sign whatever you put in front of me. I will not ask you to forgive me, because if I were you, I would not, and I would rather you not pretend.
Then we understand each other. Then we haikai. That is enough. Enough.
He was an old man, a quiet man, the sort who had seen houses fall before and did not enjoy it. Vivian signed before him in the morning room, in her pearls, with Adrian and Celine as witnesses, and the document went into his sealed case. And Vivian put her hand on the rosewood table and stood, and she did not look at May, and May did not require her to.
You will live in the West Wing. The kitchen is mine now.
It is mine. The front hall is mine.
This house will read Lynn, because I have decided it.
Will remain here on my terms, and the terms are these. You will be civil to the tutor, and kind to the children, and silent about the bandages. For as long as you live, and if you are not, then
the seal opens, and you answer for the courthouse fire.
County will read what you did. Vivian, standing, bowed her head. It was not a bow of respect. It was the slow lowering of a woman who has been a general all her life, and who has just been told on her...
The war is over. I have lost it on points.
The worst part of losing it on points is that she will have to go on living in the conquered house, under the conqueror's courtesies, wearing her pearls to a table that is no longer hers. Adrian moved out of the master suite that afternoon. He did not argue. He did not bargain. He took 2 cases and went to the small flat over the stables that had been empty since his uncle's time. And he did not say anything to anyone as he went. And Ruth, watching him cross the gravel from the kitchen window, said,
Well, there he goes. The man who wouldn't look.
Goes. The man who wouldn't look. May stood at the long window of the morning room after he was gone. She stood with her face uncovered, and she did not look in the gold scroll wallpaper or in any mirror. She looked out at the back garden, at the roses she had grown through 2 winters and 2 springs, at the bench where the boy had sat, at the bed where she had loosened the first bud. And she thought about the 30 seconds every morning in the cracked mirror, and she understood now that she would not need them anymore, not because she would forget what she looked like, but because what she looked like and what they had told her she looked like were finally, after 3 years and a morning, the same country again, and the passage between them was open, and she was standing in it. Miss Hall brought the children down at 4. She had heard, in the way household people always hear, the rough shape of the day, and she had told the children only that there had been a change, and that May was in the morning room and would like to see them. The girl came first, the boy behind. They stopped in the doorway. The girl looked at May's face for a long moment, the face she had never seen, and then she looked at May's hands. And then she ran across the carpet and put her arms around May's waist and said, "You're the Rose Lady." And the boy, slower, came up and said, "You don't look like a monster." And May, kneeling on the carpet of the morning room with the child's arms around her, said in a voice,
I was never the monster. I was the Rose Lady. I just had to let them call me the other thing for a little while.
Evening came. Celine left with her train ticket and her written apology and the small fair settlement, and she did not look back, and May did not blame her, because a tool, once set down, has its own road, and that road is its own business. The lawyers left with their copies. The magistrate left with his seal. Vivian went to the west wing and shut the door and did not come out for the night. Adrian in the flat over the stables did not light a lamp. And May, for the first time in 3 years, walked through her own house the long way, through the front hall where the cut roses stood in Vivian's crystal, and she picked up the vase and carried it to the back garden and set the roses on the bench under the open sky where they belonged, and she
I poured it for myself.
was the first thing she had ever poured in that house that was poured for herself. In the weeks that followed, the name came off the hospital wing, and a new name went up, and the new name was Lynn, and the county saw the linen on the wall and the small piece in the paper, and the story began, slowly, to be the other story, the true one. May did not give interviews. She did not stand for photographs. She let the documents do the talking, the way she had let them do it on the rosewood table, because a document does not gloat, and does not weep, and does not get the dates wrong. She kept the house. She kept Ruth. She kept Miss Hall and the children, who were now, by the terms of the settlement, hers to raise, and she raised them in the back garden among the roses, and the boy made her another drawing, and this time it was a woman with a whole face, and roses at her feet, and she folded it into the drawer beside the certificate she no longer needed, and she kept it there because some things one does not keep for proof. One keeps them because they are the first true words spoken in a house that had spent 3 years telling lies. The young
Please, sit down. You won't need that today.
porter was the same young woman who had glanced over Vivian's shoulder 6 months ago, and she sat down now with her recorder, and she did not turn it on, because she understood, looking at May, that this interview, if it was to be one, would be on the record in a different way. May told
The wing was renamed. The funds returned to their original trust.
Emily's affairs had been settled privately, and that the woman Vivian had described to this same reporter as at peace with her lot was, in fact,
The woman she called at peace now runs this household.
not give details. She did not name the fire. She gave the reporter exactly the 3 facts a paper could print without a lawyer, and she gave them in the voice she had used with the notary, calm and unhurried. And the reporter wrote them down and looked at May and said, "You knew the first time I came that I would come back." And May said,
I knew anyone who heard her and saw the linen would come back.
later, come back. Because the 2 stories don't fit, and a reporter's ear knows it before a reporter's notebook does. And the reporter left, and the piece ran, and it was short, and it was true, and it was the first true thing the paper had printed about the house. And May kept that clipping too, not for proof, but because the woman who had written it had earned, by the simple decency of her second glance, a place in the drawer beside the boy's drawing. Adrian did not come back. Not that month, and not the next. He lived in the flat over the stables, and he came, on Sundays, to the back garden at the hour he knew she would be inside, and he sat on the bench, and he looked at the roses, and he did not pick any. May saw him once, from the long window, and she did not go out, and she did not forbid him, because
I did not win this to tell anyone where they may stand.
she decided, in the back garden, and in the morning room, and at the rosewood table, that
A person's measure is what they do with power.
up, and for 3 years, what Vivian had done with power. And she would not be Vivian, and so she left the bench open to him, and she left the garden open to him, and she,
I owe no one an answer yet.
in the west wing, kept her pearls and her posture and her silence. She took her meals alone. She was civil to Miss Hall because the term said civil, and Vivian, whatever else she was a woman who kept her contracts once they were written down and witnessed and sealed. And May, in the morning room, found, to her own faint surprise, that she did not hate the old woman. She had been told for 3 years that hatred was the correct response, and she had expected, when the morning came, to feel it pour through her like the fire had once. And instead, she felt a kind of tired, clear distance, the distance of a woman who has understood that the person who wronged her is smaller than the wrong, and that to keep a reservoir of hatred for such a person is to let them go on drinking from it long after. The well should have been capped.
I did not forgive her. It wasn't in the terms.
She did not hate her, and the not hating was its own quiet wing of the house, and she lived in it as one lives in a room one has chosen, and she did not let anyone tell her she ought to feel otherwise. There was a morning, in the 2nd month after, when May went to the west wing. She did not go to reconcile. She went because Ruth had told her, in the kitchen, with the particular bluntness Ruth reserved for things she had decided May needed to hear, that Vivian had not eaten in 2 days. May stood in the doorway of the west sitting room, and she looked at the old woman in the chair by the window. And Vivian looked older than she had at the rosewood table, and the pearls were on, but the posture was not. And for the first time, May saw, in the slack of Vivian's shoulders, that the woman had run for 30 years on the engine of her own certainty, and that the engine had stopped, and the woman did not know how to be a person who was not certain. And being a person who was not certain, in a chair, in a wing you no longer governed, with the pearls still on, was perhaps a punishment more thorough than any a magistrate could have devised. May did not speak. She set a tray on the side table, soup, bread, a cup of tea, and a single rose from the back garden, cut that morning, and she left it there, and she went out. And Ruth, hearing she had gone, said, "She'll eat it." And May said, "She may." And Ruth said, "She will, because a thing you leave without a word is the only thing she knows how to receive." And May understood that Ruth had understood Vivian longer than anyone, and that understanding had not been kindness. It had been a long, clear-eyed mercy that a house like this one needed more than it needed love. The first autumn after the reveal, the boy on the bench said, "Rose Lady, are you a doctor too?"
Once. A long time ago. Why?
And the boy said, "Because the man in the book Miss Hall reads us is a doctor, and he fixes people, and you fixed the house." And May, who had not thought of it that way, and who did not need to think of it that way, knelt.
I didn't fix the house, sweetheart. The house was never broken. I took the bandages off.
And the boy thought about this, and nodded, and went back to his drawing, and May watched him and understood in the soft autumn light that she had not spent 3 years waiting only to take her own bandages off. She had spent 3 years waiting to take the bandages off the house as well, and now both faces were uncovered, and both faces were whole, and the garden was open, and the tea was hot, and Ruth was already putting the kettle back on. And somewhere, in a small office above a harbor bookshop, an old notary filed a folder in a drawer and thought, for the first and last time that year, about the woman in the sun hat and sunglasses who had sat across from him on a Saturday while a wing was being renamed on a woman's graveyard. And he thought, that one will outlast them all, because that one understood that the slowest revenge is the one that lets your enemy set the date of it for you, and waits patiently in the kitchen, drying the dishes, growing the roses, while the date walks itself across 3 years and arrives on a spring morning on a rosewood table with her face uncovered and the tea already poured. May, that autumn, took the children to the shore again. They built a sand castle at the water's edge. Miss Hall brought the tea from the bookshop below the notary's office, and May climbed the stairs once more, only this time with the children, and she showed them the small table where the file had been opened.
This is where I stopped being the monster.
And May, looking out at the harbor gulls, said, no, but
I had to come here to remember it.
And they went back down to the sand, and the tide came in as tides do, and took the castle, and left the shore clean, and May stood in the wind with her face open, and her name whole, and her house behind her, and the long blue water in front of her. And she did not look back, because there was nothing behind her now that she owed a look, and everything in front of her was the country she had spent 3 years walking toward, and she had arrived on foot in her own time with her own roses, and the bandages were a folded thing in a drawer she did not lock anymore.